Hello everybody, my name is Patrick and welcome to Tech Tuesday, where we talk about videos and photos. And today I want us to have this interesting discussion about cameras. Last week we spoke about the kind of cameras that you would probably consider when you're doing blogging. But now I want to give you to create more questions in your head and to actually give you more clarity while still asking you the same questions in what are the factors for you to look at when you're buying your camera. So, in a bit. One of the main factors that you need to consider when you're looking for a camera is what kind of a camera are you looking at. Right now we're in the generation where we've got so many options of camera. We've got what you call a DSLR, we've got a mirrorless, we've got compact, we've got action cameras. Now, all of those are different cameras that you should or would consider when you're buying. But that aside, currently the latest technology that we are at in terms of photography and video is what we call a mirrorless camera. A mirrorless camera, as you can see, is slightly slimmer as compared to a DSLR camera. And the bigger difference of the two is the fact that a mirrorless camera does not have what we call reflective mirrors within the camera, which makes it really slim, because DSLR literally means digital single lens reflex. So the light comes in through the lens, then it has to bounce through a few mirrors for you to actually see it. Now, the advantage of the mirrorless camera and also the disadvantage, if you ask me, if you're planning to get your mirrorless camera as your first camera, just know, wanna skip shule. You actually Hello everybody, my name is Patrick and welcome to Tech Tuesday, where we talk about videos and photos. And today I want us to have this interesting discussion about cameras. Last week we spoke about the kind of cameras that you would probably consider when you're doing blogging. But now I want to give you to create more questions in your head and to actually give you more clarity while still asking you the same questions in what are the factors for you to look at when you're buying your camera. So, in a bit. One of the main factors that you need to consider when you're looking for a camera is what kind of a camera are you looking at. Right now we're in the generation where we've got so many options of camera. We've got what you call a DSLR, we've got a mirrorless, we've got compact, we've got action cameras. Now, all of those are different cameras that you should or would consider when you're buying. But that aside, currently the latest technology that we are at in terms of photography and video is what we call a mirrorless camera. A mirrorless camera, as you can see, is slightly slimmer as compared to a DSLR camera. And the bigger difference of the two is the fact that a mirrorless camera does not have what we call reflective mirrors within the camera, which makes it really slim, because DSLR literally means digital single lens reflex. So the light comes in through the lens, then it has to bounce through a few mirrors for you to actually see it. Now, the advantage of the mirrorless camera and also the disadvantage, if you ask me, if you're planning to get your mirrorless camera as your first camera, just know, wanna skip shule. You're actually driving an auto car instead of, first of all, driving a manual car. What happens when that happens? You miss the steps of actually understanding how the aperture works, the ISO works, and also how the aperture and how they all correlate to get a perfect image. With mirrorless, you get exactly what you see is what you get. You know, like garbage in, garbage out. What you see is exactly what you get. And that is the advantage and the disadvantage of the mirrorless camera. Meaning you really don't need to think about so much of how the settings or what kind of settings you're getting. You just need to set the camera, see if you like what you're seeing, then go right ahead and take the picture or start recording. But with the DSLR camera, you actually need to understand what those three funny terminologies mean. That is the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter before you actually start recording. Then now, the other thing that you need to consider, which I think is very, very important, is if you're going to be blogging, meaning that you're going to be moving around, how much big of a kit do you want to be traveling with? Do I want to be conspicuous? Do I want to disappear within the crowd as a, or do I want to stand out? You know, like you have a spotlight on you as you're doing all of these things. Then that is the question that you need to ask yourself, because we have got. Let me talk about mirrorless mostly, because that's where we actually are at. With mirrorless cameras we have got mirrorless cameras that have got fixed lens, which would fall into the compact kind of cameras. So I don't know whether we call them compact mirrorless cameras. And we also have those that you can actually change the lens. So if you choose a camera that you can change the lens, that means that the kind of luggage that you'll be carrying around with you is going to be slightly bigger as compared to somebody with a compact camera. Then now you also need to ask yourself, if I'm going to be changing the lens of the camera that I'm using, then that means that I also need to know about lenses and what each lens does, or whatever lens that I'm using. So you'll also need to think about how wide a lens you need, and then how much of a zoom lens you actually need when you're going about doing and producing your own content. So those are now some of the small issues that you need to tackle even before you start considering what kind of a camera that you're using. Yes, I know the big question that you have: which brand is the best? Let me tell you, Jembe ni Jembe. The best camera that we'll ever have is the camera that we have in hand. So I've used the Canon, I've used the Nikon, I've used the Sony, I've used the Fuji. I think Pentax and Fuji are the cameras that I haven't used. So Fuji people, kindly get my hands onto a Fuji. I'd like to try it out and then give my reviews on it. But when it comes to brand, I say all cameras are good. And if you're looking at exactly what features are the best, then the camera that you need to buy is the one that has just chucked, like yesterday. I was having a conversation with someone from Canon, and they told me that as far as we know, the Canon M50 Mark II is the latest camera. Okay, in terms of the DSLR and mirrorless, and also in terms of how versatile we can use it. But the truth is, Canon I think they have discontinued. Okay, let me use the word discontinued very loosely here, but there's actually a new Canon mirrorless camera that is actually supposed to be an upgrade of the Canon 5D Mark II, which is the Canon R10. And it has everything more advanced as compared to the M50. So that is something I think I need to do a review on. Yes, I think I'm actually saying I need to review so many things. Okay, that is two. Those are two things that I need actually to do a review on. So Canon people, Canon, I need those cameras on my hands. I need to do a review on the 250D and the R10. So kindly hook me up with those cameras. And so I was talking about the brand of the camera. The brand of the camera really doesn't matter. Whichever brand that you're comfortable with, please use that. And now, people ask that what is a good camera to get? I would say whatever you can afford, because those are some of the factors that you actually need to consider when you're buying a camera or you're looking for a camera to use either for blogging or for taking photos. The budget really comes in handy, because then that will determine whether you're going to buy a brand new camera or a second-hand camera, and also the kind of camera that you're going to get. That is, like I mentioned when we're beginning, are you going to be using an action camera? Are you going to be using a compact camera? Are you going to use a DSLR camera? Or are you going to use a mirrorless camera? All those come down to the cash. But more importantly is, what are the end results and how big do you want to grow with? Because if you're planning to grow really big, or you're planning to, you're not trying this out. You've actually decided that this is what I want to do for at least like 3 or 5 years from now, then I would suggest that you get a mirrorless camera. But then if it's something that you're actually just trying out to see how it goes and whether it will actually work for you, then start with the camera that is really on an entry-level budget sort of a thing, something within the budget of around 20,000 to 50,000 Kenya shillings. That is about around 200 to 500 USD, so that you are able now to scale up. The more content you are able to produce, then the more people that you can get on board to jump with you. Then now you can actually now start upgrading your gear. Now remember, if you're blogging now, you not only need to use your camera, but you also need now other things, because there's a tripod involved, there's microphones involved, there's lighting involved. So all of those things actually also have to come in when you're budgeting for them and when you're actually looking for your ideal kit to go out blogging. Because most people think it's only the camera. The camera is the main thing, but it's not the only thing that you need to also consider, because then the size of the camera, like I said, the size of the baggage also determines the size of the equipment that you're going to carry. And the size of the equipment that you're going to carry also is determined by other factors other than the camera. So the bigger the camera, then that means the bigger the tripod, and now the heavier the luggage. So at times it is good to consider just using a phone, but since you're talking about cameras, then let's look at what more we actually need to consider. Now, when you're coming to shoot video, you also need to factor in that at times you might want to shoot some things in slow-mo. So right now, where we are seated at, you need to also buy a camera that shoots 4K. And if possible, kindly consider getting one that can shoot 60 frames per second so that you can get really nice slow-mo. Getting something that shoots at 30 frames per second is not that good, in my opinion. So get something that shoots 60 frames per second, then now you're able to get really nice slow-mo that will create that wow effect when you're shooting. Because that is what now makes your video a bit more, more dramatic and more interesting and all that kind of thing. So that is one thing that you also need to put into consideration. Then now, the final thing that I would say you need to consider is that you need a camera that not only shoots in auto but also shoots in manual. Like I mentioned in manual, the one thing that you need to know is you need to understand what the ISO does in your video and in your photo, what aperture does in your video and in your photos, also the shutter speed in your video and auto. Now, and your photos, in your videos and photos. Then that helps you to create the best. Let me just give you a solution right now. If you shoot video and you realize that you normally have flickering in your footage, then that means that your shutter speed is actually either too high or too low. The sweet spot is actually shooting it at 50. So if you have your shutter speed at 50, you're right there. You're right on the dollar, So just a recap of what we spoke about. The things to consider is, one, the kind of camera that you would want. That is, do you want a compact camera? Do you want an action camera? Do you want a mirrorless camera? Or do you want a DSLR camera? Once you have that figured out, then now you also now need to go to the second one. Then that will basically give you a few more changes. The size of the camera determines the size of the tripod that you're going to have, and also that determines how big of a baggage you're going to carry. And also don't forget that there's something called lighting and also sound. So those are things that you need to consider, but for sound, I think nowadays it's a very straightforward thing. You can either get a wireless connectivity, that is you can get the likes of Boya, the DJI, or you can get the Godox, which are really, really good. Okay, pocket friendly, really good, easily available. But then you can also just decide to get the entry-level sort of microphones. Those that are, you hook them up to the person who's actually giving the information, and then you run a long wire cable jack into your camera. I think it's normally around like 6 meters long. And I love the Boya one because it's actually really pocket friendly. It goes for around, I think, 3K, 3.5, thereabout, the last time I checked. So that is a good entry-level microphone if you're looking at starting it. If you're looking for the wireless microphones, then you're basically looking at around from 15,000 all the way to God knows what figure. So we're talking about that is the kind of luggage that you'll be carrying around when you're shooting. Then the other thing is the brand. like I told you, the brand really doesn't matter. The brand is neither here nor there. There's those people who are patriotic to Canon, there are those who are patriotic to Sony, there are those who are patriotic to Nikon. At the end of the day, a camera is a camera, then now the specs is what now makes a difference. And like I say, most people normally stick to a brand because of the accessories that they have, but a brand is a brand. Pick a brand, work with it, run with it, as long as it works for you. So, unless you have got any questions, this is me signing out on Tech Tuesday. Tupatane next week. Hopefully by then Canon will have given me a camera so that I can do a review on it and also show you how it works. So till next week, Captain Patrick signing out.